I spent Mother's Day completely alone, while my children went off to a friend's party, even though I had confirmed with them the day before that they would be coming to brunch, and they had both said yes. I cried the entire afternoon in the empty living room, but that very night they returned, asking for money to pay their bills. What they didn't know was that I had already bought my one-way ticket, and that changed everything. The table had been set since 11 o'clock in the morning. Clean linens, the good china I only brought out for special occasions, the cloth napkins I had ironed the night before. In the center, a modest arrangement of flowers I bought with the last few dollars left from my Social Security check. The chicken was in the oven, the potatoes peeled, the salad prepared, everything ready for Mother's Day brunch. I confirmed with them the day before. I called Tanisha first. She answered in a rush, like always, with that tone of voice she used when she was multitasking while talking to me. I asked if they were coming tomorrow. She said, "Yes, Mama, of course we'll be there." Then I called Malik. He was more direct. "Yeah, Ma, we're coming. Don't worry about it." He hung up fast. I was relieved. I thought that this time would be different. I thought that this time they would remember. I settled onto the living room sofa and waited. I looked at the clock at 12 o'clock. Nothing. By 12:30, I started to feel that familiar knot in my stomach. At 1 o'clock sharp, the chicken was ready. I took it out of the oven. The smell filled the empty house. I set the table and sat down. I waited a little longer. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I dialed Tanisha's number. No answer. I tried Malik. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. The chicken was getting cold. The potatoes, too. I got up and walked to the window. The street was quiet. Some families passed by, walking, laughing, mothers with their children, flowers in their hands, hugs. I returned to the table. I sat alone across from all those empty plates. Then I understood. They weren't coming again. Not this year, just like last year, just like my birthday, just like Christmas. They always had an excuse, always something more important than me. I stayed seated there for I don't know how long. The clock ticked to 3, then 4, then 5. The evening light began to shift. The shadows stretched longer in the room. Everything was so silent that I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the sound of my heart breaking once more. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I got up and put the food in the fridge. No one was going to eat it. I cleared the dishes, folded the linens, put away the napkins, and tossed the flowers in the trash. They were wilted anyway, just like me. I sat back down on the sofa, and that's when the tears started to fall. They weren't loud tears, they weren't dramatic sobs. They were silent tears, the kind that hurt the most because they come from deep inside, from the place where you keep all the disappointments you don't want to admit, the place where you know the truth but prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. I cried, thinking about all the Mother's Days I'd spent alone. I cried, thinking about all the times they had promised to come and didn't. I cried, thinking that I had given my whole life for them, and they couldn't give me even one afternoon. I'm 70 years old. 70 years of life, 48 years of being a mother. And that day, in that empty room, I realized something I had been denying for a long time. My children didn't love me, or maybe they did love me, but not enough. Not enough to remember, not enough to be present, not enough to care. Night fell, and I was still there, unmoving, without turning on the lights. Just me, the darkness, and that weight on my chest that I didn't know how to remove anymore. I thought about calling them again. I thought about sending them a text. I thought about telling them how I felt. But I didn't, because I knew they would say the same old thing. Sorry, Mama. Things got complicated. Next time. Always the next time, which never came. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when I heard the car pull up outside. I recognized the engine's sound. It was Malik's. Then I heard voices, laughter, footsteps in the yard, the key in the lock, the door opening. They flipped on the living room light and saw me sitting there in the dark, with swollen eyes, my soul shattered. Tanisha was the first to speak. "Hey, Mama, we just thought we'd stop by." She was wearing a fancy dress, her makeup perfect. She smelled of expensive perfume and alcohol. Malik came in behind her. He was also dressed up, new shirt, shiny shoes. He looked at me with that casual smile he used when he wanted something. "Hey, Ma, how was your day?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had a knot in my throat that kept me from speaking. I looked at them and saw everything. I saw the truth I had been avoiding. They had been at a party, having fun, drinking, laughing, while I was crying alone in this empty room. Tanisha sat down in the armchair across from me. Malik remained standing. There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Tanisha pulled out her phone, looked at the screen, and looked back at me. "Mama, we need to talk about something important." Malik approached and sat on the arm of the sofa. "Yeah, Ma, we have a problem. We need you to help us." Tanisha nodded. "It's urgent, Mama. It's the monthly bills. Everything piled up. Malik's rent, my credit card. It's about $3,000. We need you to lend it to us." I looked at them both. There were my children. The children I had worked for until my back broke. The children for whom I had given up everything. The children who hadn't come to brunch with me on Mother's Day. But they came that very night to ask me for money. Something broke inside me at that moment, something that was never going to be put back together. I looked at them and thought about the envelope I had tucked away in my bedroom. The envelope with the bus ticket, the one-way ticket with no return. They didn't know yet. They didn't know that I had already made a decision. They didn't know that this was going to be the last time they saw me like this, quiet, submissive, available. They didn't know that everything was about to change, and while they continued talking about their problems, their debts, their needs, I only thought about one thing. My name is Vivian Sterling. I'm 70 years old and I already bought my one-way ticket. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my children hugged me when they got home from school. A time when Tanisha ran to me yelling, "Mama," and clung to my neck. A time when Malik sought me out to tell me everything he had learned that day. There was a time when I was important to them. We were poor, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were happy. We lived in a small house on the edge of Cloverdale, Georgia. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the 4 of us barely fit. My husband Marcus worked construction. I cleaned houses. Between the 2 of us, we scraped together enough to eat and pay the rent. We didn't have anything left over, but we didn't go without either. The children were small. Tanisha was 6 years old. Malik was 4. They ran around the house barefoot. They played with rocks and sticks because we didn't have money for toys. But they didn't care. They were children. They were innocent. They didn't yet know that we were poor. They didn't yet know that other families had more. I bathed them every night in that old tub we had. I washed their hair carefully, trimmed their nails, put on the clean clothes I had washed by hand that afternoon, put them to bed, and told them stories until they fell asleep. They were my whole life. My reason for waking up every morning. Marcus was a good man, quiet, hardworking. He didn't talk much, but he loved me in his own way. He came home tired from work, sat at the table, and ate what I had prepared. Sometimes he looked at me and said, "Thank you, Vivian." That was enough for me. I didn't need more. But everything changed when Marcus died. It was an accident at the construction site. A beam fell wrong. He didn't suffer, they told me. It was quick, as if the speed of death made it hurt less, as if it were a comfort. He was 42 years old. I was 38. Tanisha was 12, and Malik was 10. Suddenly, I was alone with 2 children, no steady job, no savings, nothing more than my hands and my will to keep going. The survivor benefits they gave me after Marcus's death were pitiful, $500 a month. It wasn't enough even for food. So I worked. I worked like I had never worked in my life. I cleaned 3 houses in the morning, washed other people's clothes in the afternoon, ironed at night. I slept 4 hours if I was lucky. I got up before dawn and I went to bed after midnight. My hands became calloused, my back started aching, my knees began to give out, but I didn't care because my children were okay. Because Tanisha and Malik had food on the table, because they could go to school, because they had clean clothes, because they had shoes, because they had a mother who would give her life for them. And I was ready to give it. Tanisha was the oldest, always more serious, more responsible. She helped me with Malik, looked after him when I had to work late, prepared dinner for him, and helped him with his homework. She was an adult child in a child's body, and I felt guilty about that, for robbing her of her childhood, for forcing her to grow up so fast. Malik was different, cheerful, a dreamer, always inventing things. He drew on any paper he could find. He told me that when he grew up, he was going to be an artist, that he was going to be famous, that he was going to buy me a big house, and that I would never have to work again. And I believed him, because mothers always believe their children. The years passed. They grew up. The house felt smaller and smaller. Tanisha started complaining. She said her friends had better things, better houses, better clothes, better lives. She looked at me with that silent reproach that hurt more than any word, as if it were my fault we were poor, as if I wasn't doing everything possible. Malik changed, too. He stopped drawing. He stopped dreaming. He started hanging out with other boys. He came home late and wouldn't tell me where he had been. When I asked, he answered in monosyllables. He became distant, cold, like a stranger living in my house. But I kept working, kept sacrificing myself, because that's what mothers do. Because I thought that someday they would understand, that someday they would be grateful, that someday they would tell me, "Thank you, Mama, for everything you did for us." When Tanisha turned 18, she got a job at a downtown store. She started earning her own money. I thought she would help me. I thought that now that she was working, I could rest a little, but no, Tanisha saved every cent. She bought new clothes, new shoes, makeup, perfumes. She went out with her friends, and when I asked her to contribute something to the house, she looked at me like I was asking for her kidney. Malik barely finished school. He didn't want to go to college. He said college wasn't for him, that he was going to get a job, that he was going to make money, and that he didn't need more education. I didn't insist. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of everything. He got a job at a mechanic's shop. He earned little, but it was something. I thought he would stay with me, that he would help me with expenses, but after 6 months, he told me he was moving out. He had found an apartment with some friends. He needed his space. He was a man now, and he couldn't stay living with me forever. I remained silent. I didn't tell him that I felt abandoned. I didn't tell him that I was afraid of being alone. I didn't say anything. I just helped him pack his things. I gave him money for the first month's rent, money I didn't have, money I took from my meager savings, and I watched him leave without looking back. Tanisha left 2 years later. She met a man, fell in love, and got married. She didn't invite me to the wedding. Well, she did invite me, but it was one of those obligatory invitations you make because you have to. I went to the wedding. I sat in a corner. No one talked to me. No one introduced me. No one made me feel important. I was just the mother of the bride, an afterthought, an obligation. Tanisha's marriage lasted 3 years. Then she divorced, came back to my house crying, telling me the man had cheated on her, that he had treated her badly, that she needed a place to stay. I took her in. Of course I took her in. She was my daughter. But she didn't thank me. She stayed for 6 months, recovered, met another man, and left again without saying goodbye. Malik never married. He had girlfriends, many girlfriends, all fleeting, all the same. He introduced them to me when he needed to impress them. "Look, this is my mama. Bless her heart, she lives alone, always so sacrificial." And they looked at me with pity, with that pity that makes you feel small, invisible, unnecessary. The years kept passing. I kept working, even though I couldn't clean houses like before. Even though my back hurt so much that there were days I couldn't get out of bed, even though my hands trembled, even though my knees wouldn't hold me up. But they kept coming. Tanisha and Malik kept coming when they needed something. Money, almost always. $200 for rent, $300 for a debt, $500 for an emergency. They never quite explained. And I gave. I always gave, even if I had to skip buying my medicine, even if I had to eat less, even if I had to turn off the heat in winter to save, because they were my children, because I loved them, because I thought that someday they would change, that someday they would grow up, that someday they would realize everything I had done for them. But that day never came. And while I waited for that day, they kept taking, kept asking, kept forgetting about me until that Mother's Day. Until that day I sat in the empty living room, crying, waiting, slowly dying inside. And they arrived that night, smelling of partying and having fun, of a life I never had, and asked me for $3,000 as casually as asking for a glass of water. That's when something clicked in my head, when I understood that this was never going to change, that they were never going to change, that I could keep giving and giving until I dropped dead, and they would keep taking without thanks, without remembering, without loving. That night, I didn't give them the money. I told them I didn't have it. Tanisha got mad. She made that face she made when things didn't go her way. "But Mama, you always have something tucked away. You always help us. It can't be that right now. You have nothing." Her voice had that accusatory tone, as if I owed her something, as if it were my obligation to solve her life. Malik was more direct. "Ma, we seriously need this money. It's not a whim. These are real debts. If we don't pay, we're going to get into trouble." He looked at me, expecting me to give in. Because I always gave in. I always ended up giving them what they asked for, even if it left me with nothing. But this time, I didn't give in. I looked at them and told them no, that I didn't have that money, that I barely had enough to live on, that my Social Security check was only $1,200 a month, and that I had to pay for electricity, water, food, and medicine with that I had nothing left over, that I couldn't help them this time. Tanisha got up from the armchair and exhaled in frustration. "Unbelievable, Mama. Right now, when we really need you, you can't help us." Malik also stood up. "Well, then we'll have to figure it out some other way. Thanks anyway." His thank you sounded empty, fake, like everything that came out of his mouth lately. They left without saying goodbye, without asking how I was, without noticing that I had been crying all afternoon, without seeing the table I had set for them, without caring that it was Mother's Day and they had left me alone. They left and closed the door, and I stayed there again, in that empty living room, in that empty house, in that empty life. I stayed awake all night. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop going over everything, the years, the sacrifices, the times I had gone without eating so they could eat, the times I had worked sick to pay for their school, the times I had given them even what I didn't have, and they didn't even remember. They weren't even grateful. To them, I was just an ATM, a place to come when they needed something, a resource, not a person, not their mother, just a source of money that should always be available. The next day, I got up early. I hadn't slept, but I got up anyway. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in the kitchen, and made a decision. I was going to investigate. I was going to know the truth, because something didn't add up. Malik had a job. Tanisha did too. Both of them earned more than me. So why did they always need money? Where was all their income going? I opened my phone and went onto social media, something I almost never did because I didn't quite understand how those things worked. But Tanisha had shown me once. She had shown me how to search for people, how to see their photos. I searched for Tanisha's profile first, and there it all was. Photos and more photos. Tanisha in expensive restaurants, Tanisha in new dresses, Tanisha on trips to the beach, Tanisha at parties, Tanisha with drinks in her hand, Tanisha smiling, Tanisha living a life that, according to her, she couldn't afford. A life full of luxuries while she was asking me for rent money. I kept scrolling. More photos, more restaurants, more clothes, more trips, posts from a week ago, 2 days ago, yesterday, last night. A picture from the party she went to instead of coming to brunch with me. She was with her friends, all made up, all in fancy clothes. The description read, "Perfect day with my favorites. Hearts, emojis, happiness. A perfect day." While I was crying alone in my house, while I was waiting for them to come, while I was saving the food no one was going to eat. A perfect day. I searched for Malik's profile. More of the same. Photos at bars, photos with friends,